Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Good Saturday afternoon out there, everyone. Welcome to your number one source for Native American television news, Native News Today. I'm your host, Jason Salzman, as we get ready for this week's episode here in Muskogee Media Studios. And our first feature of the week is a conversation with a third-generation genealogist, Mr. Rick Fogarty. He is Muskogee Creek. He is from New Jersey, planted there from Oklahoma, but he is a genealogy researcher, and he visited with us about his life and what led him into his profession.
My name is Rick Fogarty. I work for Ancestry Pro Genealogist, and I am a third-generation genealogist. I'm a citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation. It's been my passion. It was a hobby, and it turned into a career. When I was adopted, and I am an adoptee. I was adopted in '77 before the Indian Child Welfare Act. So I was adopted by non-native parents, and but they knew that I was Creek, and so they raised me with knowing that, and I had to do all the research on my own and learn about it. And the older I got, my mother and my grandmother were both genealogists. So I had it not only I had it around me all the time. So. It was something that I put it off for a long time, and I finally went, hey, this is pretty cool. I need to check this out. So when I got older and started getting to, learning about my adoption and breaking that open, I started uncovering my biological parents and started looking at, more of the Muskogee Creek for me, and I was always there. So when I talked to my biological mother, she told me everything I needed to know, and that was just it. I had already started doing professional genealogy, helping other people, and it just exploded and turned into a full-time career. So I love helping people solve mysteries. I mean, I'm a detective kind of by nature, and that's one of the neat things is helping people solve complex problems. Who's my great-grandfather? I didn't know who he was, and trying to solve those things. And now with DNA testing blowing up, you can't turn on the TV without seeing a DNA test commercial on TV. That's made it a lot easier for us to solve some of these problems. So that's the gratifying part for me, is helping people solve those mysteries. Now it comes with the downside. I mean, there are some of those mysteries that when you find out that information, what do you do with it? How do you contact people who didn't, this was a surprise to them. When they took the test, they didn't realize I'm going to find out surprises about my family. So it does come with a bit of a caveat of, you've got to be careful with that, but that's the rewarding part for me, and especially with my own research. Just knowing where I come from, who I am, and again with my roots. I mean, it's not only is there, I've got my Indian side, I've got some African American, I've got English on one side, I've got French Huguenots on another. So it's just where do you come from? Sure. So, the political stuff I kind of try to stay out of, because people speak out of turn, and I've seen that in my career with a lot of when college application time happens, I get people wanting, people coming to me to find their great-grandfather, find their Indian ancestor so they can get benefits, and that's it sends up a red flag for me when I see that. Do you just want to find it for that reason, or are you looking to find it for your own knowledge and for your cultural reasons, for your roots? So when it gets to those giant political issues like that, there's a lot of people right now, and I'm not one of those people, but there are some very adamant people who will call those people out, and I think that's a good thing, because we do need to keep people in check, that they're not riding the coattails. They're not saying, hey, I'm from Oklahoma, and I've got that. There's a paper trail that goes back with that, and that's to answer your question a little further. The documentation is great, and one of the things that I really like about the tribes is there's a lot of cultural activism right now to keep those records, to preserve those records and make sure that we're keeping the history, especially with the language programs and everything like that. Those are important because when you go back and look at the rolls prior to the Dawes Roll in 1906, you start looking at these rolls from 1820s, 1830s. They're in the Muskogee language, and the names are phonetically spelled. So trying to look at how those names, how to pronounce the names, how to say the names, and what we're keeping the language alive, that goes hand in hand. We need that in order to understand the records. So we don't want to see the language go away because we need speakers. And the other thing is just those family lines. You know, there's the common Creek names that we see, and it starts. I was just talking about this on the interview on the radio, was how those families mix together. Is there going to be one giant Muskogee Creek family that we start to see, especially with tribal towns, and how do those tribal towns make up particular families, where they came from? So you might have the Harjos here, the Tigers here, the Barnetts, the Escos, there's McIntoshes. I mean, there's any number of places that those families are going to come from, and did that tribal town, whether it was in Indian Territory or whether it was in southeastern United States, in Georgia and Alabama, were those tribal towns, are those part of a bigger family line? So that's kind of where I think things are. You get into that kind of deep genealogy, and it becomes a really big mystery, and that's what we're working on. So, well, I grew up in Oklahoma. I just moved to Jersey at the first of the year, and it's been a big culture shock for me. But one of the things that I've grown to appreciate is the way that tribes are, the way that we have such a unique approach to our tribal life with the nation, and the way that they really support the citizens compared to other places around the country. With services, just the language program we were talking about, and even the culture, preserving the culture. So one of the things that I'm excited about, and again, it goes back to the kind of the controversy of DNA testing, and I was talking about this a little bit earlier, was the word disenrollment. If the government decides they want to do something, they're going to do it. If whatever happens is going to happen no matter what. But I encourage people to do DNA testing really for the benefit of knowing their family, for your own hobby, for the genealogy. I was talking about, I have some friends who are Cheyenne and Arapaho, and I saw 100% test, and I've got another friend who's 50%. And one of the neat things about that is there's this myth that Indians don't test. They don't do DNA tests because they don't want to know, whatever, insert whatever myth. And they had way more matches than I had on my test. And I'm going, man, this is 100%. This debunks the myth that Indians don't test. So for whatever personal reason, you don't have to test. There are lots of things you can opt out on for a lot of the testing companies. So make sure and read the terms, and don't listen to the hype. There's a lot of hype out there. The DNA isn't. You can't use it for enrollment right now. The tribe takes. They only take documentation, and that's fine. So I encourage people to take those tests. Just for the fun of it. If you've got a quantum on your card, take the test and see what it says compared with that. Now the ethnicity estimates they're estimates, and we got to keep them that way. But it's a lot of fun to look at, and it's a good hobby. It's you find yourself at 4 o'clock in the morning, searching through your match list, going, I've got to wake up for work the next day, and I can't put this down. So it definitely, you'll get bit by the bug. So that's what I encourage people to do, is if you're going to do it, get into it as a hobby and just have fun with it. So.
And we want to thank Rick for stopping in, and it's a pretty neat little story there as we see so much popularity in Ancestry.com and things like that, DNA nationwide. So I want to thank Rick for stopping by, and keep in contact with him as he does a lot of great work there. Well, our next story takes us up to Tulsa. And we have a principal that is a 5th-generation teacher. She is Muskogee Creek. She's a descendant of Modi Tiger. Her name's Deidre Privet, and she is a principal at an elementary school up there. She talked with us about her diversity there at the school.
I'm the great-great-granddaughter of Chief Modi Tiger. I'm a 5th-generation educator. It's not something that I really set out to do at first. I wanted to do something that made a lot more money, and it just didn't feel right, and education just kind of fit. So I've been in education now for 28 years total. You've got Hispanic kids, you've got our Native kids, we have Hmong kids. This whole melting pot here, it's my job to help my teachers understand that, these kids weren't raised like they were. They don't learn like the teachers did. And so we've got to figure out the best way to reach these kids.
What's that book here?
Teaching is just in your blood. You're either a good teacher or you're not. It's a natural thing. So I encourage anybody that's got it to go ahead and come on into the profession, but there's a big caveat there. It's not a money-making thing, and that's not what it's about anyway.
All right, folks, and if you watched us last week, you saw us roll out our new series, basically chronicling some of our archive material that we have from the vault, as we're calling it, Muskogee Media. We go back into our archives, bring you some of the things that were produced around here this is from 1981. It is A More Perfect Union. Last week we showed you part 1. This week, the final part 2 of A More Perfect Union from the vault, 1981.
If you think anything about your own government, well, do the best you can, because this is yours.
Our Creek Nation is viewed as being a sovereignty. As such, our government is limited by only 2 provisions.
This meeting of the Muskogee Creek National Council will now come to order. We'll stand for our invocation by Second Speaker Helen Chupko.
"1979 was an important year for the Creek Nation. That year, the Muskogee people ratified a new constitution that would be the foundation for the operation of a strong tribal government. The Creek Constitution begins with a preamble resembling the United States Constitution. Then, the document goes on to define the Creek Nation and the terms of citizenship. Then it breaks the powers of government into 3 familiar branches: the executive, legislative, and judicial. Gary Beshears, executive director of the tribe, explains the executive powers of the government.
The Constitution of the Muskogee Creek Nation clearly places all executive powers within the office of the principal chief. Legislation passed by the National Council must be forwarded to the office of the principal chief for approval. In addition, the executive branch is responsible for carrying out the legislation and policy that is passed by the National Council and approved by the principal chief. Now, due to the importance of the positions of principal chief and second chief, both of them are elected at large by the Creek Nation voters. The qualifications for both the principal chief and the second chief include they must be 30 years of age or older, must be at least 1/4 blood quantum of Creek Indian blood, and must have lived within the boundaries of the Creek Nation for at least 1 year. In accordance with the Muskogee Creek Constitution, the principal chief is to organize and create the executive office with the advice and consent of the National Council. In 1971, when Claude Cox was elected chief, he began putting together the executive branch that within 10 years became one of the most productive tribal governments within the United States. And about the 1981 fiscal year, the present National Council did adopt the creation and the organization of the executive office as submitted by the principal chief. The day-to-day operation within the executive branch is carried out in 4 basic organizational components. The first is the Office of the Treasury, which deals with tax and cash management, deals with payroll services. The Office of the Treasury is headed by the Controller, who is appointed by the Principal Chief and confirmed by the Council. The Office of Independent Agencies deals with the different boards of the Creek Nation, the Board of the Housing Authority, the Board of Health Affairs, the Board of Economic Affairs, the Election Board, and the Citizenship Board. The third unit within the Executive Office is the Office of Justice, and the Office of Justice provides legal counsel to the tribal organization. Any contracts that the Creek Nation has with any attorney to provide these services must have the approval of the council. And the fourth organization is referred to as the Office of the Administration. In the Office of Administration, it provides the support services for the entire tribal complex and organization, and also provides the day-to-day program activities. In taking the oath of office, the Principal Chief promises to uphold the Creek Constitution. One of the many things involved in the Constitution is the annual delivery of the State of the Creek Nation address. This address usually outlines some of the progress that we have made during the last year, and also looks ahead to priorities for the future.
I, Claude Allen Cobb, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of Principal Chief of the Muskogee Nation, and will to the best of my ability uphold the Constitution of the Muskogee Nation.
Now our government must grow in new ways. The installation of this National Council, provides legitimate representation for the Creek people. For the first time since the National Council was dismissed in 1907, we must now put aside our difference and unify behind the elected National Council. Whatever our destiny may be, it will be determined by the National Council. We must allow the decisions of the Tribal Council to replace decisions by federal courts, and we must unite behind those decisions because they are our own. One characteristic of our people is their will to rebuild. Our nation has rebuilt itself countless times in the past. After DeSoto's invasion in 1540, after Andrew Jackson's invasion in 1814, after our move from our homelands in the South, and after the tragedies of the U.S. Civil War, and after the allotment of our lands, and after the suppression of our tribal government. Each time our people have recovered and have rebuilt, have progressed in the ways we choose for ourselves. The tragedy of suppression of our tribal government is ended. Rebuild our nation is our mutual responsibility. Thank you.
Kenneth Childers, Speaker of the National Council, explains the nation's legislative powers.
The National Council is the legislative body of the Creek Nation. They're like the Senate of the United States government. There is one house made up of 8 members from geographic districts, as referred to in the boundaries of the Creek Nation of 1900. In the original 1867 Constitution, there was 2 houses, a House of Warriors and a House of Kings. But that was voted out in this 1979 Constitution. Council members will serve 2 years. And he must be over 18 years of age and be a full citizen of the Creek Nation. And he cannot be during his term of office, he cannot be an employee of the Creek Nation nor hold an appointed office. The Speaker of the House is elected by the Council to preside over the Council meetings. And he cannot vote except in case of a tie. And then there's a second Speaker who presides in the absence of the Speaker. The Council has the power to legislate on all matters important to the Creek people, as long as there is no conflict with the United States Constitution. These include the health, safety, education, and welfare of citizens. The National Council authorizes all expenditures from available funds for tribal purposes. For example, all your federal contracts have to be approved by the National Council. And all of your appropriations for operating the tribal government will be authorized by the National Council. An ordinance, when it comes to the council, it comes in a resolution form. All right? The council will either adopt it and then pass it on to the chief for his approval or disapproval. If he disapproves, then he has 10 days to get it back with his reasons to the council. The council can override his veto with 2/3 vote. But he has 10 days to do this, and if he doesn't do it, then it's automatically an ordinance. The first council under the 1979 Constitution was inaugurated in January of 1980. And a removal ordinance was presented in March. It was ignored by the council. Then it says in the Constitution where all expenditures will have to be authorized by the council. The council wouldn't authorize the chief to spend any money. So our Creek Nation was at a standstill. So we lost $6.6 million in housing alone because the council boycotted a joint meeting of the council and the housing authority. So a recall committee was established. They got the required petitions from 3 districts and took it to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The Bureau said they would remain neutral in this cause. It was a tribal matter. So they brought it back to the chief. Then the recall committee hired an attorney who went back to Judge Bryant, who gave us our Constitution in the first place. And then he got up there and he decided that it was a tribal internal matter, that we were a nation and he had no jurisdiction over us. So then the recall committee asked the chief to sign a proclamation declaring these seats vacant and set an election. And this is what happened.
The judicial powers of the nation are vested in the Supreme Court and other inferior courts. The Supreme Court is composed of 6 appointed judges who serve for 6 years each. Elliott Howe is a Tulsa attorney and is now serving as Chief Justice of Creek Nation Supreme Court.
Our Creek Nation is viewed as being a sovereignty. As such, our government is limited by only 2 provisions. One, of course, is that our government cannot be in conflict with the United States government. And the other, which is equally valid, of equal validity, proclaims that we must abide by our Constitution, which guarantees basic human rights and due process. We might take a lesson from how this has been interpreted by various states, because we are a state. We are essentially a state within a greater state. And the confusion and chaos which exists between state government and federal government certainly means that our fledgling Creek Nation can expect to face many complex problems. Hopefully, the federal government intends to confer the right of self-determination on the Creek Nation. The common good of our people must always come first and prevail. And only constant vigilance ensures that selfish individuals and special interest groups are never allowed to usurp the will of the Creek people. I have had people tell me that this looked like a dual citizenship. I don't think so, because our loyalty is to America. Our goal is to create better citizens. And I am compelled to believe that we recognize this economically. And we must educate our people, and so they can live useful lives and be self-sufficient. And self-determination is the answer. It's up to the Supreme Court to keep the Creek government on course with these goals that are set out in self-determination and which are guaranteed by our Constitution.
In some areas, the extent of the powers of the Creek Nation is still unknown, but this Indian nation is making strides towards self-determination and self-sufficiency with pride in its heritage and accomplishments. No matter how far we, the Muskogee people, have come, the work must go on in order to form a more perfect union.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for another episode of Native News Today. I want to thank everybody out there for watching us here on the Tulsa CW 1219. Also, for everybody out there that continues to watch us online, you can go to our YouTube channel, hit the red subscribe button, get all of our content as it comes to you on demand right as we upload it. So we want to continue to get everybody out there on board with our online and on the television here, and as well as MuskogeeMedia.com. For Jared Moore and all the great people here at Native News Today, we'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.